wrong number.
Well, we have two.
Apparently, there were several other people on that other number. Just FYI.
Really?
Really. So I called the number at the top instead of the number at the bottom, I guess.
Oh, and there are different numbers, different logins for the morning and the afternoon presentation. So.
Right, and we called into the one that was in the morning.
Okay, well,
So I said it's the number that was on the top.
the best thing is you're here and we're here, and Sue's going to work with you to advance the slides. So thanks for getting it all worked out, Sharon. I did provide an introduction. I provided your bio a little while ago, and so now I'll turn the whole thing over to you.
Oh man, I didn't even get to hear it. Okay then.
You'll hear your bio.
Or afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name's Sharon Robertson, and we're going to talk about asking the right questions today. So we're going to start off, why would you ask a question? And by the way, this is more of a participatory type of event, but why would you ask a question? Are you trying to get to know someone or a new team? Are you looking for some information? Is there something out there you don't have that you need to know? What about, do you need ideas from your team? Are you trying to stimulate thoughts? So these are some reasons you might ask some questions. And there's a lot of other reasons out there, I'm sure. These are the ones off the top of my head. So the first thing I want to talk about, what is your goal? What is your goal for your question? And I want you to think about that really hard. Your goal is really to get the answer, right? The answer is what you need. So think about the answer or your goal as your destination for your question, all right? Think about your question as the journey to get to the destination. A lot of times what you really want to do, you want to plan ahead for your questioning techniques and what kind of questions you're going to ask. You might even script some questions ahead of time before coming into the meeting to at least give you an idea. And of course, things will change as you come into the meeting or ask the questions because situations will change. But one of the things to think about too, I don't know about anyone on the phone, but a lot of times if I've got a challenging question or a challenging situation and I need to find out some information or get a response back about this, I'll think about it in my head. I'll plan it out. I'll run a script of how the entire scenario is going to run in my head. Of course, best laid plans. No one follows the script in your head. No one follows that script. So think about that and be ready, be flexible, be adaptable. Realize they're not going to do it. And if you're married or you have children or you've done things like this with your coworkers or manager or employees where you scripted something out, you know it's not going to follow. The other thing to think about here on your goals is that flexibility, of course, but also I've got these scenarios up here. We're going to talk about some of these scenarios later on. So keep these questions in mind and we'll see them again. So let's talk about what kind of response you want. Are you looking for a simple, specific response? If so, you're going to ask a closed-end question. If you're looking for more detail or more considered response, ask open-ended questions. Look for and offer options. So a closed-ended question. What's the first thing we need to do to make this, to implement this solution set? What's the first thing we need to do? Or an open-ended question. How can we improve this situation? How can we take lessons learned to improve our situation? You want to consider too the frequency of your techniques and your styles, your questioning styles. If you want your people to grow and develop and solve their own problems and opportunities,
crazy.
And we've got some feedback, some background noise going on the phone. If you want your people to grow and develop, then you don't want to ask closed-ended questions repeatedly. You don't want to use that as your go-to questioning style. You want to ask some of those open-ended, get some more thought and detail from your people, right? So they're thinking. Now, conversely, there may be times when open-ended questions aren't appropriate. If you've got a situation where the decision set for whatever it is that you're trying to work on is coming to a close, your group is starting to really gel and you can see them improving, then maybe that's not the best time to ask an open-ended question and reopen the situation, right? Or maybe you've got a time constraint. The meeting time's coming to a close. That might not be the best time to ask an open-ended question because you're not going to get all the discussion that you need. Yes? No? Maybe? What about context? Okay, now I'm going to have to read off this definition because it's very difficult for me to remember it word for word. But context is defined as the interrelated conditions in which something exists or occurs. Okay? So we think a lot of times you hear people say, oh, well, that was taken out of context. So that's words and quotes. But teams have context too. Groups and organizations have context. And this is really what you're looking at when working with teams. It's about the circumstances where they've grown and developed. It's their history, their culture, their team personality. So context is important to understand for a team or a group or an organization. And when you're asking questions, keep that team's context in mind. Think about that. And if you're paying attention to your group, your team, your organization, to your people within the group, team, or organization, you'll pick up on, as you observe, you're going to pick up on sensitive items for the team, the group, the organization, your people. So context is important, and we'll talk more about that. So these operating tenets, if you will, and I apologize, I'm forgetting to say next slide. I'm sorry, Sue. Sorry, Steve. These operating tenets, if you will, are some of the things, basic things you want to keep in mind when asking questions. So we talked about context just a moment ago, the last slide, right? Everybody's good on context? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What about thought-provoking? Don't you think, is that a question that really is going to drive some thought? Or is that more of a leading question? So you don't want to ask leading questions like, don't you think such and such is the right way to go? What if they don't think that? But what if you are a manager or a team lead and now, or maybe you're a director, CEO, anything like that. So now you have people who are like, okay, well, that's what they want me to think, so I have to agree with that. You want to ask thought-provoking questions, questions that are more available for people. Don't ask leading questions. Don't ask trick questions. People pick up on that. They pick up on it really fast, and they start to lose respect for you. Oh, they don't think I know what I'm talking about. So my favorite is to keep it simple, silly head. Your KISS principle. Keep it simple, silly head. All right. You want to read and respond to verbal and nonverbal cues in the room or on the phone. So if you're live and in person, presenting to a team or asking questions of a group or a person, pay attention to their body language and to yours. If you're live or on the phone, think about your vocal tones, the way that you speak, and the intonations in your voice speak volumes, and people respond to it. I'm not saying they always respond positively, because let's think about a monotone. People don't respond well to that. They start dozing off and nodding off, and the people in the room are seeing me lay my head on my hand. So think about these things, not just your verbal cues, but also your nonverbal cues. When it comes to assumptions, you should make sure those are transparent to everyone. So that means not just bringing up your assumptions, but finding out what their assumptions are. And then you can ask questions to find out which assumptions are valid and which are just perceived, but not real. You want to be sensitive when you're asking questions. Again, be aware of body language, yours and the person who you're asking the question, to whom you're asking the question. Note hard and challenging questions can up the risk and anxiety levels of your group. A lot of times you may ask a question that's a challenge. Maybe you're asking someone to step outside their comfort zone to work on a new task, a new project. You want them to lead a new project. And you ask them a question about this. And their anxiety ratchets up because it's not something that they've done before. It's not something they're comfortable with. It's outside their comfort zone. Sometimes you're facilitating and participating. This is always a challenge. A lot of times you'll have a group that you're facilitating, so you're trying to be the neutral third party, right? But a question arises. Maybe you ask it, maybe someone else asks it, but it's something that you have a stake in. So you need to be cautious at that point. Again, not to ask those leading questions, but to listen as well. So when you're listening to that response, don't be negative to the person or the responder, if you will. Don't challenge them. If you have a stake in it, you may, so I say don't challenge them. Let me rephrase that a little bit. Don't challenge them in a negative way. You may challenge them. Yeah, don't confront them. You may want to challenge them to think about it a little harder. And that's fine. You're asking thought-provoking questions. Right there on number 2, right? Be careful with asking why. Ooh, this is a really good one. So why, and I know a lot of us, when we think about root cause and things, we ask why over and over and over again. And that can be fine. But don't want to ask, why didn't you get that task done? Why aren't you finished with that? What happens when you ask why in that way? The people get defensive, right? They get their backs up against the wall, they're defensive, and you're not going to get a good response. You're not going to find out the answers that you need. So be careful asking why. And make sure the question makes sense, right? This is one of the things my husband and I experience a lot, is that I will ask a question that I think makes perfect sense and is very simple, and he has no idea what I'm asking him, or vice versa. So this happens a lot with people that you engage with on any basis. So one of the things that you can do, if you think there might be some concern or some lack of understanding with the question, but you need to get the right response to the question, ask the question of somebody else, someone who knows what it is you are trying to ask, someone who knows what the goal is for your question. Maybe you ask several people. And it helps if they know who your audience is too, who you're going to ask the question of, so they can see a different perspective for you and help you in getting a question that makes sense. All right, building trust. This is the foundation of asking a good question. Having trust in your group, your team, your organization, the people that you're working with or that you're asking the question of. I have 3 words for it, well, 3 expressions here for you. Integrity, authenticity, and mutual respect. Those are the 3 key points for building trust. So first of all, keep everyone's integrity. You can do this by maintaining an objective stance, by understanding any conflicts of interest that may be going on. So maybe you are trying to find out some information from someone who's trying to help you, but they also have to help someone else that maybe the response is negative towards someone else. So maybe you have a schedule that's not being met. and they have to explain that a person on the team was not able to accomplish their task. And maybe it's because the supplier didn't get something in on time, or the engineering wasn't done on time, or whatever the reason is. But so there's a conflict of interest because people don't want to report negatively on others, right? Another thing, avoid taking sides and be fair when you're asking the questions. Now, you want to stay authentic. No one likes anyone that's fake, right? We don't like the plastic Barbie dolls out there that are asking us questions or working with us or whatever, or that we see on TV even. You know, there's nothing authentic about that. And as human beings, we like authenticity in each other. So ways for staying authentic: build your team's ownership in the goals and in the results. Not just, this is our goal, yes, everybody on the team agrees to it, so everybody's good with that. We need to own the results too. You need to help your team own those results for your goal. Acknowledge when there are issues. Be transparent in the reasons for your questions. Let them know why you're asking the questions you're asking. If you're trying to decide on a solution set for a problem that you're out there working, you had something happen on the factory floor, for example, and you want to come up with a solution set so this doesn't happen again. So you're asking your group questions to try to figure out what's going on and how we can fix this. Let them know. The reason I'm asking these types of questions are these are things that we've experienced in the past, or maybe I'm trying to get you to think of new things, come outside the box and think of new ways to solve something that then we can maybe even share across the company. Be honest. Actively listen to what your team's saying. Actively listen. So that means not just hearing what they're saying, but understanding what they're saying. Summarize, paraphrase. Actively listen and understand. And then you want to maintain mutual respect. So establish the team norms and guidelines. These team norms and guidelines actually help build some ownership. You also want to acknowledge the team's dynamics, be impartial again, and then value and appreciate and respond appropriately to the team's energy. So sometimes you have a team, I had a team this morning, and everybody's still asleep, you know, we're kind of dragging. I'm like, okay, stand up for just a moment, step away from the table. We're going to play a quick game of Simon Says and re-energize everybody. So, respond to your team's energy. Next slide, we're going to encourage involvement. Because what's the point of asking a question or getting with a group to solve a situation, opportunity, problem, challenge, whatever, if nobody's involved, right? There's some different things about involvement, and I've got them listed here. And I want you to think about, you've asked a question, you've got a response, and then conversation stops. So this is your opportunity to ask follow-on questions. So, interpretation. This is where you make sure that you understood what the response was. Is this what you meant? Is this a document that you were referring to? Point of view. So getting some different perspectives. What are some other suggestions? Have any of you tried this before? There's validation. This is where you're looking for what's the supporting information behind the response. What data supports these findings? What made you think about this as a solution? You know, kind of getting that, because it doesn't have to be necessarily data. It could be historical information. It could be they've done this before in another environment. And by doing that, it popped in their minds and they're like, hey, what if we do this? So there's some support there, some supporting information. Possibilities. So are there other ideas? What other avenues did you explore? What do you think is the most important opportunity here? So these are some possibility questions you can ask. and consequences. So if we do this, what's going to happen? I'm sure most people, if not everyone, has done some sort of risk analysis in their lives, whether at work or at home, and it doesn't even have to be a formal risk cube or anything like that, but just you thought about, okay, if I do this, what's going to happen? What's the result? So questions you could ask, what are the risks if we take this route? And what's the impact and how much effort is it going to take to do this? So that's a risk analysis of some sort. You're encouraging involvement. You're asking those follow-on questions to build on the discussion. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about the scenarios that I talked about earlier, or that I showed you earlier and said we'd get back to. Now we're getting back. So if you want to get to know a new team or a new person or a new group, or you're coming into a new organization and trying to find out what's going on, a lot of this is interpersonal dynamics, right? So beyond the normal, usual questions that you ask to get to know a new group, like what's your name, what's your job, who do you work for, how many years experience do you have, you want to ask questions that help you really get to know the people that you're going to be working with and asking questions and talking with. So these are things that you might want to ask that help bring in that buy-in. So I'm going to start off with sharing personal experiences. So what's your favorite hobby? Oh man, that's really cool. Has anybody else worked with that or done any of that before? So you're kind of getting the team drawn in. Maybe it's a new team. So you're kind of getting them drawn in and involved with each other. Ownership. What's your biggest interest in this project? Does anybody else share that interest? Are there other interests out there? And then you kind of go around asking each person that. Clarifying the objectives of the team. People interpret things differently. If you're married, if you have children, if you work with anyone, you know not everybody sees things the same way. They don't interpret the same information the same way, right? Now think about it this way. Think about all those perspectives out there in your company and in the people that you know, personally and professionally, about all those perspectives and how those different perspectives have helped your company grow, have helped you as a person grow, if it's outside the company even. So having different perspectives and interpreting things differently can be a good thing. But when you're trying to focus on a common goal, you want the interpretation to be the same. Yes? Mm-hmm. So, a couple ways you could do this. You could do a round robin. You could state what the objective is, do a round robin, making sure that everybody's understanding it or how they understand what the objective is, and discuss that as a group. Or if you don't have time, what you can do is state the objective, paraphrase it, and ask if anyone has questions about it or has concerns about it, if there's something they don't understand about it. And then building ownership. If you remember a couple slides ago, I talked about norms and guidelines and how that can help the team develop ownership. When you build ownership, sometimes maybe you want to ask them, hey, when have you felt you've had a successful project? What made it successful? Can we do similar things in this project? How can we bring what you had as a success into this project? We're asking some thought-provoking questions, right? First, we started off, we asked a simple direct question, the close-ended. When have you had a successful project? Then we started asking some open-ended questions. Get those creative juices going. When you want to drive an action or solution, there's a really cool tool out there that's used frequently. It's called the what, so what, now what. It's a very effective questioning tool. And it's very similar to a situation target proposal. What? What's the situation we're in right now? So what? What's the big deal about it? What is the impact of it? What does it mean? What does it matter? Why does it matter? So that's your target, right? Now what? Okay, what can we do about it? How can we improve our situation? There's your proposal. Very simple, very useful tool when asking questions. Because a lot of times people think situation, target, proposal, oh my goodness, I've got to draw up some document, put all this on paper, do this, do that. So you can change it around if you're just trying to find out some information in a meeting. What? So what? Then what? Ooh, now we want to analyze the situation and we want to define a solution. So you really want to get everybody's creative juices flowing here, right? So one of the things you want to do is think below the surface. We've all heard about the Titanic in our lives, yes? No? Maybe? Well, you know, the icebergs that they hit, you can only see a little portion of it above the waterline. The majority of the iceberg was below the surface. When you have a situation arise at work or at home or anywhere, and you're trying to solve this situation, you're trying to figure out what to do to fix it, you've got to remember to look down further beyond what you can see, because if you just fix what you can see, usually that's just a Band-Aid. You're putting a Band-Aid on it. Sooner or later, that Band-Aid's going to peel off and the situation comes up again. So you want to look for the root cause. And so you want to ask some tough questions. You want to think, how do you get to that root cause? Ask open-ended questions. Ask some choices. Do you think the widget build failed because we forgot to do the gear, or because the gear was added without the correct tooth ratio? Do you think there might have been some other reasons? So you want to work through the analysis systematically, asking types of questions over and over again until you find what that root cause is. We talked about assumptions earlier and challenging those. So remember, we want to make all the assumptions come up to the top, not just yours, but the team's or whoever you're asking the question of. So you can analyze those, challenge them by asking questions about them to find out, is this assumption a valid assumption or just a perception, just an opinion? And then consider other ways. So are there any other considerations we need to make? Are there any other reasons you can think of that could cause the widget to fail? Is there something we can do to keep it from happening again? And that's one of your most important questions right there. How can we keep it from happening again? So we'll go to the next slide. Now we're closing a workshop or a meeting. So at the end of your workshop or meeting, you want to help the team come to a close. Usually you summarize and ask questions that help with the lessons learned about the team's dynamics. So what did we learn in this activity? Is there something that we could have done better? If we were to do this on another activity or another project, what are the recommendations you would make to make it better? And then ask each participant if there are any further clarifications needed or any concerns that were never addressed or that need addressing further. Next, so that's your rear view mirror. You're asking what happened, what we can do better, how we can grow from this. Now you want to look straight ahead through your windshield, right? We're not always going backwards and reverse. We want to see where we're going, heading in the future. So how can we communicate the lessons learned from this activity? What's your biggest activity? What's your biggest takeaway from the activity, and how can you use that going forward in other projects? So think about things like that and questions like that. In closing, now we have part of the fun part. Next slide is the very fun part. But in closing, know why you're asking a question. So what is it you're trying to find out? Know your question's goal. What result do you need from your question? Know what kind of response you need. Is it a simple, direct, or more thought-provoking, more detailed and considered response? Understand the team context for your questions. So things like, what is the team's history or culture? You want to consider your operating tenets, things like context, thought-provoking questions, being attentive to the team. Build a trusting relationship with your team. Remember, that's the most important thing to get good answers. Because if the people trust you, they're going to give you open and honest answers. So these are things like integrity, authenticity, and mutual respect, right? Encourage involvement with your questions. interpretation, making sure everybody understands, validation, consequences, what's going to happen if we do this. And then close your workshop or meeting with appropriate questions. So look in your rearview mirror and look straight ahead through the windshield. So here's the most fun part of this entire presentation. Now that I've given you all this information about questions, do you have any for me? So if you're on mute and you have questions, please.
That was open-ended.
It was. It was an open-ended question. What questions do you have for me? By the way, the answer is always 42.
This is Avis. I've been working for years and years and years, and anybody who knows me will tell you that I ask a lot of open-ended questions because I believe in full disclosure and getting all the information I need in order to make an informed decision, including asking why. Well,
Okay.
what I have discovered recently is that a lot of times I ask my open-ended question that I think is a perfectly reasonable question.
Mm-hmm.
And either I get a non sequitur for a response, or the other side of the coin is people are looking for more direct questions that they only have to say yes or no. And I'm really in a pickle trying to figure out, you know, are my open-ended questions just too long in this age of sound bites?
So one of the things to think about, if you think about the very beginning, what's the goal of your question? What is it that you need from the question? Are you needing a lot of information? Or are you needing a small amount of information that gets you what you need? What you want to know?
In most,
and also, well, hang on 1 second. The other thing is to let the person that you're asking the question know why it is you're asking that question. So they know what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
That you need more information than just a yes or no, or because that's the way it's always been done, things like that.
Yeah.
So let them know in advance why you need to ask the question, and let them know why you're asking the question.
Yeah. In most cases, I ask open-ended questions, and I ask a lot of questions because I want to be sure that I'm getting input from everybody there. Because obviously,
right.
there's always someone in a team who, doesn't speak up and probably has information that they don't even know they have sometimes.
Right.
So I tend to ask probing questions sometimes, but it is becoming more and more interesting to gather all the information in this day and age. And it's even worse when you're asking the questions in email and not face to face.
That is, because in email you don't have the verbal and nonverbal cues.
Right.
You have interpretation. Yeah. And everybody reads that email differently.
Mm-hmm. No, I really.
You might have a big smile on your face when you're writing the email asking the questions, and they're reading it and they're like, "Oh my goodness, she's so mad at me. What did I do wrong?"
Yeah.
How did I mess this up?
I really enjoyed what you had to say. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Other questions, answers?
Kind of want to follow in that path a little bit, because when you're asking those more thought-provoking questions, mm-hmm. and you're trying to get to the answer of that, giving the person the space to think about that, mm-hmm. and not having there be the silent part while they're thinking. Before while they're thinking about the answer of that thought-provoking question, is it kind of like a good methodology to give them breadcrumbs there, or just to let them think and kind of deal with the silence?
Silence isn't always a bad thing. When I'm in a Toastmasters meeting, for example, One of the things I said, a pause is fine. There's nothing wrong with a pause. There's nothing wrong with some silence. And if you're going to ask some thought-provoking questions of a group, and you know in advance what those questions are, because remember, sometimes you're going to have this scripted in your mind and the questions are going to change based on what happens in the meeting. Maybe you can send some of those questions that you really need answers to in advance. So they have some time to think about it, They have some time to think about it ahead of the game. There's nothing wrong with that. Because also, remember, we want to keep it simple, silly head. And build that mutual respect and integrity and authenticity. Other questions? Comments? Answers?
So I have I'm not sure if this is a question or a statement, so we'll see where it ends up when I get to the end. So I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and then listening to your presentation, I realized a lot of times I ask questions being, 90% sure I know the answer. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm asking to kind of confirm what happened that I think happened.
Right.
But I think sometimes that can come off as I know what you did. Maybe. And is there a good way of going about that? Because I certainly don't mean it that way, at least most of the time. There are sometimes. But is there a good way? Because I guess in my mind, I don't see it being bad asking a question because I'm not trying to accuse. I'm trying to confirm. But is there a good way of going about that?
So you're looking for a different perspective. You're looking for points of view that maybe can help validate what you're asking, what you think you have in your mind is the right answer.
Yeah.
So a good way to address that is, this is what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. What do you think about it? Or is there something that you can see that I've missed in my rationale? Those could be some different types of questions that you can ask. To let them know that you've got something in mind already, mm-hmm. that you need to know if there's something else they can think about, or that mm-hmm. maybe they could consider for you that you haven't thought of. Mm-hmm. And let them know that you're asking for their opinions, their thoughts, and their perspective. You want
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is Mariah with Blue Cross. I was wondering, how can you apply this? Say, for instance, I think about interviews. At the end of the interview, when they always ask, do you have any questions for us? That moment, is there a way that you could use the same techniques or techniques that you presented that we could use to, kind of feel more comfortable or confident in those moments?
There is, actually. And I'm going to go back to slide 6, I believe it is. Okay. Remember when I talked earlier about your context for your team, which is on a different slide than this, I understand. But we talked about context for a team, which is on slide 5. And that's kind of the culture and the history of the team, which could be of the interviewers or the company that you're interviewing with. And I said, pay attention to what's going on because you may find sensitive issues for the team. If you pay attention and you're kind of listening to what the team's saying, how they're reacting to the responses that you're giving to their questions, you can kind of get a feel for them. And then you can ask things that maybe have something to do with, on slide 6, the operating tenets, that now you have listened, you've heard what they're saying, how they're responding, and you're aware of the sensitivities of the group, maybe a little more aware of the sensitivities of the company. You've responded to their verbal and nonverbal cues, and now you have something in mind. Okay, actually, I was wondering what kind of culture this organization has in their teams, or how does this company handle this type of situation? Think about some specific situations you've experienced in the past that you want to see how they handle that. kind of delve into their culture and their context a little more. Or maybe through this, you're thinking about some thought-provoking questions for them of what specific, maybe you're asking a simple question, excuse me, I'm so sorry. You're asking a simple question, very direct. What type of duties would I have in this position? Or if I were hired, what are some of the activities that go on in this company? What are some of the involvements that I can expect to be with? You know, listening to what they say and then judging some questions off of that. If you've had a tour of the area, that's a minefield for interview questions that you can ask them because you've seen some of it. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you. Yeah, it really did. Thank you.
Welcome. Other questions?
Sharon, this is Steve. I just wanted to comment. You hit on something that I think is important. Everybody may not, but I do. And that is throughout your presentation, especially in the early part, you spoke to the tone and tenor of how you ask a question.
Yes.
There are people who are skilled in the art of always asking a question that has an accusation in it. And that just works my last nerve. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one. There is a way, if you don't understand something, or even if you feel something isn't quite right, or you just don't get it, there is a way to, through your tone and your words, to get the answer you want without sending the receiver into orbit, because suddenly, as you say, he or she feels threatened. And I think it's important to work on that. I know I serve on the board. I'm going to a board meeting this weekend. And I sit there sometimes and I watch people go, what planet are you on? Do you not hear how you just came across? And so I just want to say I'm glad you brought that up.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, there are 11 more minutes, so you've got 11 minutes to ask questions, or we can close out.
No, I have to tell you,
I leave it to you.
I have to tell you, Sharon, more people have asked questions after your presentation than most of our webinars this year. So you're doing well.
See, and you guys thought it was a trick question when I asked on slide 14, questions, after talking about questions.
Yeah, yeah. I did like your comment about asking questions in advance. Maybe that's something I should try when I understand that, when I recognize in my own mind that I'm asking an open-ended question that could have lots of responses. Give people a chance to think about it.
And another thing on that too is, don't forget, sometimes you can run the question by someone else first that understands what you're trying to find out and understands the audience you're asking, just to make sure that your audience understands what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that people tell me I am good at is laying the groundwork before I actually get to my question. But I learned that lesson the hard way.
I think we've all learned that lesson the hard way.
All right, Sharon, on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you for a great webinar. Avis is exactly right. I think you get the prize for the most questions, which tells me, A, you did a good job, and B, you picked the right topic. So I appreciate it, and we look forward to having you with us this afternoon for the 3 o'clock session. I would ask that you give Sue and me a quick call at the end of this here at work, and we'll get all ready for this afternoon. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah.